Hi, I'm Tom Woodruff Jr. for the Stan Winston School of Character Arts, and this is my lesson on character design techniques. And in this lesson, we're going to look at a variety of ways to get across the idea of a character design that a producer or director can be able to look at and understand, and how he's going to work it into his world. There's a lot of ways of doing this. We're going to start with some very loose concept sketches. This allows us to get the idea and the feeling of the character down on paper. From there, we're going to move into more detailed sketches and eventually end up with Photoshop art, which takes our loose sketches and translates them into photographic elements that are much more real. Eventually, we'll also move into doing design maquettes, which now helps take our flat artwork into the 3D world so that we're able to inform and make the character be understood in terms of three-dimensional representation. All of this is in an effort to get to this stage where we can create full-scale characters to inform the director and the producer and hopefully make the next step of bringing this guy to life on screen. So let's get into sketching as a character design technique, because it is the beginning and really the best way, the loosest way to get started. When I think of sketching, a lot of times I go back to, well, certainly in my years working with Stan Winston. Stan had a great technique, a lot of sketching, a lot of pencil work. And I want to kind of start even before that, where things are much rougher, and it's really more about, at this stage, more about concept, right? I think design is really a two-step process. It's concept, which is very loose, and it's all about the mood and capturing the feeling of the character. And then the second step of design is where you really take that loose concept and you start to refine it, and you have to start working within the practical elements of perspective and real world definition, meaning how's that flat drawing going to look when it's really sculpted. So there's a lot of kind of loose overlap. Sometimes you can jump from one step to the other, and like I mentioned, the interesting thing about doing this character, which is such a well-known, a time-worn character, a Frankenstein character, is there's a certain parameter that we want to stay within, at least what I want to stay within with this particular character. So I think just in terms of loose concept, I think in terms of exercise, and again, it's to me it's not important. It's not important about having. I'm not trying to do photoreal sketches, right? So if I'm trying to do a profile thing, and I'm just trying to catch the feeling, this is, to me, it's the equivalent of if you look at a costume designer like Edith Head, who would generate these beautiful artistic interpretations, which were concept, not design, although they're referred to as design. But the point being, if you look at them, those aren't the perspectives, those aren't the proportions of a real human being. So they would have to be interpreted in terms of designs once the actual work is done. That'll be the next step after I get this feeling. But my idea, again, for this Frankenstein character is not just wanting to copy what Jack Pierce did with Boris Karloff, but come up with something different. But there's certain iconic elements, and my take on this Frankenstein character is definitely that the flat head idea is cool, right? With the advent of being able to get in and digitally adapt a makeup or a character in the end, we can now, instead of building up on the top of the head like Pierce did for Frankenstein, what we can do is actually digitally cut that material away. So, for example, I want to keep eyes, obviously. Eyes and mouth, I think, are very important just in terms of character. And the other idea is that this is a creature that's been put together, but not slammed together in kind of a piecemeal stitched way. I didn't want to go as heavy with that kind of homemade look as like Robert De Niro, right, in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Different take. What I want to do instead is make it look like thinking that Dr. Frankenstein had started with some kind of a subject that was already in pretty good condition to start, right? It's like if you're going to rebuild a car, you're not going to start by robbing little tiny pieces out of the auto junkyard. You're going to get as much of the working thing as you can. So let's say, what if he had a dead body and he did the brain work? So I'm thinking that I like this kind of raked angle leaning forward. It sort of adds a characteristic of evil, as opposed to sloping back. I I like the fact that if we're missing this much forehead, it suddenly also takes away a little bit of the feeling of this thing as being particularly smart, which to me means you're not going to be able to reason with it. It's going to be sort of bent on a very, whatever, primal reaction of being a reanimated corpse. So I want to get into that a little bit with the design. So that to me is the strongest line that I'm really trying to establish with this character. I don't necessarily want to make a jutting forehead, only because it's been done so many times. So this kind of angle in here will probably pretty much stay what the actor's forehead is. Like I said, we'll keep the eyes as a real focus point. So if we keep all of these main lines intact, we can do whatever we want with the rest of the face, which I'm thinking I want to make it look a little bit emaciated, right? I want to get it a little bit of a scullier thing. I don't want to take away the nose, again, partly because it's been done. It's cool when it's done, but I don't know that necessarily I want to show that amount of decomposition has happened. Again, I don't think he's dug up a skeleton and started to apply muscles. I don't think it's that nuts and bolts kind of approach. I think it's more about starting with a pretty good-looking dead body, and then doing what you have to do internally to make it something that can be reanimated and brought back to life. So with that in mind, again, concept-wise, I don't know honestly that this is even much that I would definitely show a producer. I think from a point of view of creativity, I think this is the kind of thing that would be great with a director to sit down, and spend an afternoon and do loose sketches, so that we're all saying the same thing. Because even as I'm sitting here mindlessly babbling, there's certain concepts that would be great to have a back and forth discussion with the guy that's really going to be putting this thing to life on screen, meaning the director. I think also from a profile is for me. I love starting with profile, by the way. And the other thing I like doing is doing very simple lines. You know who else was who I find was really great, a great sketch artist, Bernie Wrightson, is just excellent. It's like everything I've seen him do is cool, because I think what Bernie Wrightson has been capable of being able to do is to he gets into a lot of detail, but his human characters are well detailed. His environments, his backgrounds are beautifully fleshed out. But when I look at some of his creature work, some of his creature designs, there's a looseness to that, which to me is a great in between concept and final design. There's a I don't know, it's to put into words. There's a fluidity, right, to his way of drawing, and there's a fluidity to the way his character work looks on the page. There's room to interpret it, and that to me, whether it's a creature or makeup, animatronic, whatever it is, to me it's important that the audience has some room to interpret things. Again, I think what's interesting about getting into sketches too is that it allows you to exaggerate. This is the perfect medium, right? It's like if you could have an actor's face and have all this happen without prosthetics, you could come up with perfect look. So what we're trying to do is come up with the look that is the character, and then in a later step, once we go from concept to a stronger design, we'll find out how to interpret the character aspects of the concept into a firmer design that can then be sculpted. I think with the Frankenstein character, stitches are really important, right? We got to show that it's got that handmade look to it. I don't want to go crazy with it. I'm thinking his head's been cut off and removed. I'm thinking this portion of skull has been even discarded. It wasn't necessarily important at this stage to replace the skull and create that final symmetry that we're all familiar with. And I don't know if I've said it before, but part of the whole genesis of this was for me was seeing a news story about this kid who had undergone some really extensive brain surgery, and the interview with this guy, he was very good at expressing himself, much better than I'm doing right now. And they talked to him for a while, and as the camera pulled out, you suddenly realized that a good portion of his head was missing, in that he had so much extensive brain surgery that there was a certain amount of mass that was gone, and then the skin was pulled down over it. So that was shocking. Like not in a horrifically monstrous way, but I think how that affected me was more along the lines of There's still a perfect humanity, but there's something so glaringly different that you know it's not. It couldn't just have been done as a makeup, right? So that's the kind of feeling I want to get from this thing. Is it shouldn't just look like a monster. It should look like a human being that has had something horrific done to it, which has resulted in it being horrific. The other thing I'm thinking would be great, and I don't know that I'm really going to get too much into whole body stuff, but what I really want to do is I want to have this open jacket feel. I want to see the like the remains of an autopsy scar. I think that's a great signature thing too. Again, to show that it's a corpse that's been worked on. I'll probably get into something with hands, but I think this is a nice thing. Just be able to restate and keep that in mind that we're talking about a reanimated corpse. I'll also bring out some of the more cellular aspects of the face. And I'm also thinking that this is it's not a modern day interpretation, although I guess it could be. It just in a complete vacuum of where I'm going with this. I'm thinking of this as being Victorian period, or maybe late 1800s, very early 1900s, and I see this guy in a long kind of coat, period coat, and I'm thinking that this guy could even have longer hair right on the sides that almost, again, in silhouette, designing in silhouette's a great thing. In silhouette, you could almost see this guy standing in the mountains, right, with the wind blowing and the rain and all that, and almost have it look like kind of a romantic character. So long hair here, up here, this hair is all going to be shorn, shaved down to basically just stubble, and at least that's the look right now I'm going for in terms of concept. Okay, so here's my first idea, right? Spitting it out on paper. This is the great thing. This is the great thing about a cheap pen and cheap paper is that there's this is the time to start exploring, not when the thing is done and you're standing in front of the cameras and you've got about 6 weeks of work behind you. So let's say, I love the idea of the sloped head, but what if let's just look at it. Maybe the long hair alone, right, will take care of it. If we don't need to worry about the shape of the head. Again, the actor will come up with some kind of cool body moves. I just need to see enough here to place the head the right way. So, yeah, so right now he's got like a normal sized head, and we're saying he's got that kind of cool long hair. And maybe it's just enough that the hair is shaved up here and we still leave that shape. I don't know. Let's see. I'm not coloring it out because I hate it, but just in terms of silhouette, right? It's kind of a good way to look at things. I'm not too interested in showing all the details. This is just about silhouette again. Okay, so here's something that's cool that's coming out of this is keep a real thin neck. The long hair helps to make the head look like it's a little bit oversized and makes the neck look, here I'll say this, makes the neck look fragile. Now if I'm in a meeting with producers, I would never throw that out because producers go, no, Frankenstein's got to be strong, he's a monster, and that's tough. You get in those situations too where you're trying to satisfy somebody's notion of what this character needs to be, which that's fine, it needs to be, but you got to be careful of the buzzwords. So what I would say then, I guess, rather than making the neck look weak, I would say it makes it look more skeletal, because we all know how strong skeletons are, right? So it doesn't weaken them. I think there's something cool about that, not even getting into the slope of the head. Again, the silhouette aspects, there's something kind of kind of creepy about that. Let's see. If we just keep going a little bit further with this. Now I'm thinking, what if I'm wrong about the long hair? Okay, so if we don't do long hair, and we count instead on this thin but muscly strong neck, okay, how's this compare now in silhouette? That's interesting. I guess the only, when I start looking at it this way, the only thing that feels kind of negative about this one is that it just gets closer and closer, right? Now all of a sudden it just becomes, you know, Boris Karloff, and that was done so well, I just don't want to redo that. So, but, interesting. Maybe this is something where we get past concept. I'm just sort of kind of torn about whether I want to fill in all this space around his neck with the hair. Maybe it's maybe the hair could be a lot stringier, right? It's there's that aspect of bodies that have been in the grave, been in the ground for a while, where the hair starts to pull away from the skin, and maybe we can still get that kind of long hair look, but just not as solidly done, so it doesn't become a big block like a shawl around his neck, but it becomes more of a wispy kind of thing, which could be cooler. Just going to go back to this cut off head again just for a second. Okay, so here's what I'm doing now. This is the concept sheet, right? This is what the concept artist will do to sell the producers on the idea of the skinny neck, is to make it longer. And I don't care that it happens here, because I know it's just a concept, and it's not about coming up with a direct proportion right now. We'll get into that once we go to step 2, which is more design. But I like that look, and I do like this. I'm just trying to sell myself on staying with this idea, because I did think there was something very cool about it. So if we go in profile now, and we just go with more like the longer, wispier hair, so it lets some light through, that might be the cooler way to go. And then what I could also do is not make this perfectly flat. I don't want it looking like a shoebox or a dinner plate, but I can put some breakup in here, so just get the feeling that it's some kind of a tissue. It's not just an exposed brain, right? That's just too 1950s sci-fi. But what if it's the exposed brain, and rather than, let's say maybe Frankenstein knows that he's got to get in and out of this brain because the job's really not done. So rather than replace the bone and have all that graft, maybe he's got some kind of a cartilage or something. So something that forms a little bit more to a shape and not completely flat. And then, of course, here's the one thing I will steal, because it's just so cool, right? Is Karloff's eyelids in Frankenstein, right? He had those tabs that were made out of, depending on what you read, if it's nose putty or wax or whatever it was, something that basically, can't really show it in the concept, but it's basically something that weights down the lids and gives you kind of a half-lidded look. So it almost gives you a perpetual look, as if you're still half awake, half dead, and not, you know, maybe not even half aware of what's going on, you know, so your actions would completely change that. But that, I think, that's the one conceit that I'll just openly steal, and nobody will know except you people watching this video. Yeah, I mean, there's something that will be kind of classic and cool and kind of rip-offish about the whole thing. Anyway, so there you go. So in concept, I do feel like I like the wispier hair. I like the skinnier neck. I definitely like the flatter look to the top of the head. So when we go into the next phase now, I won't completely discard the idea of any of these just now, but and again, this is all very condensed. I mean, what we just saw happen in 15 or 20 minutes, it takes days to really explore. It's just that I've got the virtue of having had this in my head for so long, so I'm kind of, I don't want to just force it to a particular direction. I do want to kind of explore some things, but I think at this point, it'd be good to move on and show you now how you go from, you know, very loose concept stuff to tightening it down to something that you can really achieve for the cameras. This is an interesting thing to conceptualize because so much of this is a human face with changes to it. I think there's still going to be probably 85% of whoever the actor is going to be left, and that's probably going to be a key thing because a character like this is certainly going to be a name actor, and you want to capitalize on making him recognizable, as well as for the actor's ability to do his thing. You don't want to add so much to him that you're interfering with that. So with that in mind, like I'm just kind of torn. I'll do a slightly more detailed thing, but in reality, I'm kind of hesitant to go to anything that looks like a real photoreal rendering. Partly because I'm kind of rusty at it, right? And even when I was not rusty, I wasn't that good at it. So, but the nice thing is if you take away you know, something else from this lesson, if you're designing something that isn't completely human or whatever 85% human, it might be it's still could be a very helpful thing to be able to go just kind of in between really loose concept, really non-existent proportions, and kind of work out some more details. Like, for example, let's say if I wasn't openly using those Karloff eyelids, this might be a great place to in pencil to kind of explore and come up with an idea like that could then be further refined in Photoshop. So I guess in a way this is a little bit of a cheat because I'm kind of just moving forward with what I found in the concept stage, but seeing if I can just discover anything else that. Because here's okay. Actually, here's a great thing is all right. I kept drawing the concept. I just knew in the concept I want some kind of shadowed. I want some kind of a sunken area in here, basically just to help define those really hard forms that will give this character, you know, a real edge to it. And now as I get into this, I'm thinking, wow, there could be this really cool aspect. Maybe it's coloring too. It's even though I'm just working in pencil, maybe it becomes a coloring thing where you can start to see the skin is not holding up in as well. You know, post-operative as Frankenstein had hoped, but it's starting to deteriorate. Again, could be a cool thing against the idea of making it a romantic figure with the long hair, as if framed, you know, in silhouette, it has this kind of a cool, a strong male image. But then as you get into more lighting and you suddenly reveal that wow, it's really a thing that's half dead. Cool reveal, and it's hard. You know, this is a character that's been done so many times, and it's just and the Karloff version is such an icon. It could be really it's really difficult not to come up with something that has already been seen. So getting into a little more detail like this actually helps. It kind of pushes me ahead towards thinking in terms of more in coloring and what I want to say about the details of skin. Look, you just right. There's elements you can't escape Karloff. Okay, so seriously, what's the answer to that, right? I don't want to just be seen as ripping off something that's cool. So, this has become a problem. Actually, I do think the big thing, the big difference, and I keep going back to it, will be taking this away. Making sure it comes up to full height back here. Could even exaggerate that a little bit. And I do think that's what makes it unique. Oh, here's the other thing too. Maybe this, oh, I got it here. Maybe this autopsy scar that I want to do, I might just bring it right up here across the neck for two reasons. Right? It makes it look a little more invasive, right? And not like an autopsy isn't invasive enough. But I think what I like about this, bringing it up through here, is that it makes it look like it was more of a functionary thing, having to open up the neck, open up the throat for whatever reason, right? And then the other aspect is when this character is completely clothed, an autopsy scar is going to be completely hidden. So what we'll want to do is have something that extends from the collar and reinforces the fact that this is a guy that has had some substantial work. And not that Dr. Frankenstein was a caveman, but I'm also not thinking that he was really again, I'm picturing now in terms of character stuff that drives all of this, is that he's a brilliant research kind of guy, a brilliant thought guy, but maybe not so great on execution. So maybe some of the surgical aspects of it are kind of rough. Oh, I think we should also, I think I'll also run a big scar back here. I should go a little tighter with that. And the reason being that as I see this would kind of help define this flatter spot, and would also give us a nice indent here. So it's not just a painted on scar, but it actually becomes kind of a partial keloid scar, right? Which are the ones that kind of swell up and like tribal scarring kind of ritualistic stuff, right? If you've seen that, it becomes a raised scar. But also the depth of places where the scar is so subcutaneous, it's so deep under the skin that it actually pulls everything down. So, and again, just getting away from, since we can cheat this, since all of this is in effect going to really be way up here where we have the room. We'll be able to go down inside and really get some more depth to it that way. So look, there's you know, a dozen different styles of sketching, and I always start up really light, and then I will slowly start working in the shadows once I get the general form lined out. All right, so here's my thoughts on sketching. There's dozens of different ways to doing. My particular way is just that I like to start up really soft. I like to start with a lot of loose lines. I'm still more in concept phase than I am in specific design phase. But once I get the general shapes laid out, then I like to just start going in now and dropping in with my shadows, which I'm not going to go as completely dark as they may finally end up being, but I do like using them to start bringing forms out of the paper. And because the eyes are such an important aspect of the character, always has been, always will be, I'm going to start here. Because the other thing is, if I end up not liking it because I mess up the eyes, then I'll just abort this whole thing and you won't see anything of it. So again, I'm trying to fight the urge to just continue this line straight across, which, again, the only reason I'm trying to fight it is because it's already been done. If you're working on your own character, your own original design, then go with the urges, right? I mean, this is a piece of paper and it's a pencil and it's half an hour or an hour, and better to explore it now than to wonder about it later. And that is interesting because that brings up another element that I don't know how far I'll get into this, if I get into sculpting the character, but there's an aspect of I think there's a lot of designers today that partly because things have to happen so fast, which again, this is great for concept, but because things have to happen so fast, there's that tendency to kind of go with the first thing that comes out on paper. And the problem with that is then you don't really know for sure that you've explored all the best aspects. So what we do, particularly in sculpting, and whether we're doing it ourselves or we have sculptors coming in working on our project, is to encourage the sculptors on early passes to go too far. It's kind of a cool concept where it works in sketching too, right? But you have a certain look that you're trying to establish, and once you find that look, go a little bit beyond it. Go a little too far, if nothing more than to just satisfy your artistic question as to whether this is the best approach. Because there's value in going too far, because you kind of establish. Again, it's about establishing not rules but boundaries, and knowing that you really explored and took in a particular direction, and especially when you inevitably get into the stage of having gone through the whole process. If it's a makeup or an animatronic character, you've sculpted it, you've created the skins, and now you're on set, and you've got somebody, a director or producer now, who's suddenly wakes up one morning with a different idea and says, "Yeah, but did you ever think of this? Have you ever tried this?" And it's good to know that you did, and to be able to represent the process that the exploration process of concept work. I think too, I'm going to try to resist the urge to start adding a bunch of scars to this guy. Oh, I like the idea of real thin lips. Actually, as I do that, that's kind of cool. And maybe you'll do some kind of an overhang here. I'm thinking of not wanting to cover this guy's face in appliances. Right? I'm thinking that again, from an acting point of view, the more the actor has his actual face carrying the role, the better. So I don't want to get into anything that's too extreme. I like the idea of the head. I like the idea of certainly these cheek hollows, depending on the actor. They may end up becoming something that's color and also maybe just a little bit of appliance. It's hard to say until we know who the actor is. Hard to say until we know what the final design is. But if anything, I think what's useful, if it's coming across that way, is I'm going, even though I still consider this concept somewhat, it's certainly much more developed than any of this stuff has been. And in developing it, it kind of helps me put in mind things like I've been talking about, things like color and how far to go with surgical scars, and kind of establish where your character is being lit from. And in this place, I think it's really important to figure that the light is going to be somewhere up here coming down, because I do want to get that shaded eye, and that lid that we're going to build is going to pop out, and that's going to create some light over top of his eye, which helps make it more of a focal point, because without it, it's going to be lost. Here's the thing. I keep playing around the eye, and I think the reason being that I think I'm starting to like the feeling too that this sort of accentuates the eye socket, and it sort of gives it more of a sculptural look, which is kind of cool, right? As long as we have the eye itself and that eyelid coming out of it, so it doesn't just look like an empty eye socket. And I'm not sure yet what I want to do about teeth, right? It's like I don't think every aspect of this thing should be screaming out monster, monster, monster. I think I don't want to do the rows of jagged picket fence teeth, all yellow and stained. Maybe it's just more of a light staining on the actor's real teeth. If it's a guy who's got teeth that are just way too perfect, then maybe we'll do some kind of a dental veneer that'll break it up just a little bit. Probably notice I'm staying away from the hair too, because I'm still thinking, do I want to go with the long wispy hair or the long solid hair? And since I'm still in concept stage, I don't really have to decide yet. I can try it both ways. Here's something else that's great too about concept sketch. You can get things to a certain level, and if you want to start doing variations, go ahead and scan them and just do printouts on plain white paper, and You can do your variations that way. It's funny, without hair, I do really see he's got to have more muscle to his neck than my earlier concept drawings. I could just pull some of this out. Just so we have a feeling of tendons and tight skin in here. I like the idea of some loose skin around the neck too, as if the skin's started to separate from the tissue underneath. I'm still concerned about silhouette because again, you can't beat it. Silhouette's not just for design, right? When you look at some of the way that some of these really special characters are introduced, or even throughout a film, just the way they're captured on film, it's all about light and shadow. And I think when you have a strong silhouette, you have a strong interpretation of a character that way. In fact, what I'll do is I'm starting to, I'm completely staying away from the hair, because at this point I want to try to see variations with the pencil technique, not so much the general marker concept stuff. Keep in mind, this is all actor head right here. I don't need this piece. Look, you know what else is the most important thing about doing concept work like this is making mistakes. The magic eraser gives you the freedom to explore. I'm going to commit to this silhouette only because I do want to go ahead and print up a couple copies on paper, just to kind of play around a little bit more with the hair. So what I'm going to do is, because I feel like I've got the silhouette really well established. It just keeps coming up. I've tried some variations. It comes up as being the strongest thing. So I want to lock the silhouette in for two reasons. Technically, because when I have this thing scanned and then printed out on paper, it will come out really hard and definitive, and a lot of this pencil line work may fall away, which is not that important because I can always reestablish it. But I just want to be able to see that silhouette pop. I guess if I was going to go another step, I would probably just color the whole background in black. But this is just a quicker way to get to where I want to be, which is to do some final work and figure out what the hair is. This is interesting too now when you start to see a real true black on the paper, and you realize that even my darkest colors are just a kind of a light gray. It would really be beneficial for me to just take a minute and go in and darken some of these down. I'm also just using, I'm just using the cheapest pencil, an office pencil. And charcoal is great. Soft lead pencils are great because in nice rich black. I also used to love, when I was doing this more often, I would love doing them with a black Prismacolor. Alright, I don't care about the ear too, because I'm going to cover that over with hair. So I think what I want to do now is make some copies. So look, these are just some printouts of the scan of the sketch. And this is only because I just want to, but now I'm going to go back and erase a bunch of stuff. I just want to see what where I'm going to go with this hair. guess there's a couple of things to keep in mind too about you know, the length of the hair, the density of the hair, the color of the hair. I think the interesting thing is if we go, the thinner we go, you start to see the scalp through the head. It does a couple of things. It's going to make for a slightly more expensive appliance if we're trying to get something that we reuse and we punch the appliance, or we're making some kind of really thin lace net so we have skin showing through. And that's one aspect, but conceptually it also, and I can see it now, so I'm kind of glad I went in this direction with sketching. It also has a thing about, there's an aspect of it that looks more diseasey. It looks, you know, hair falling out. It definitely looks like it's a little more ugly than I think if it has a full head of hair. And if I want to stay with that, again, with the romantic notion of this long-haired character, starting to think that not letting that scalp show through is probably going to be a big part of it. This will be nice too. With the hair, I can also help kind of define that scar that's going to be partly raised and partly buried, just with the way I choose to run my hairline right up to it. I can also just let it kind of cover the ears too. And then up here on the top, this is all be very thin, short, sparse, just so it looks like it's been shaved rather than bald. And that part I'm sure of. That I think there's an aspect, if we put some little details like even shaved hair like this, I'm talking about really shaved, close cropped hair, I think that just helps add a little bit more realism so it doesn't just become a big flat rubber head. Let's see. Let me try something with this pen. Only because it's still showing through. The sketch is still showing through. I just want to be able to see this a little bit better if this is all. I like the idea of going back to the stronger hair, but just not letting it bunch up around the neck as much as some of the concept stuff was showing. I don't know. I'm kind of digging this. Look at that. I think I like that without, I'm not going to tie up his hair. Oh wait, I said that. Maybe I will. I may tie up his hair. I may tie up his hair. There's something kind of cool about that. Maybe, starting to get that kind of John Alden Pilgrim look now. But, okay, here's what I'm thinking about this, is that now we can still have the thinness of the neck, we can still have the long hair, so in silhouette we've got this kind of cool romanticized figure. And by having the hair denser and thicker, and we're not showing so much scalp, it's not quite as anemic. Look, it comes down to what the character is, right? This thing is just strictly what I'm throwing out there. It's not anything I've seen in a script. A script could come, the character could be something that is this representing Frankenstein as a failed experiment? Is this representing the monster as something that's been alive now for years and has just been out on its own in the wild, and it's slowly falling apart? All those things are certainly going to affect where you're going to go with the character design. But in terms of me just throwing something out, I'm sort of balancing between wanting to pay homage to what I think is the coolest version, which is the Karloff Jack Pierce version, and not wanting to copy it. So maybe this is the balance. Maybe I found the balance, because this sort of satisfies what I've been having, again, kind of stuck in my head for years. So I feel like I could keep detailing this, certainly, and if I felt like I wasn't quite as rusty at sketching, I may do it, and it might be good practice. And again, it certainly is a quick way to do something, but I'm feeling like I want to kind of get into Photoshop and start playing around with a real human photos of a real human head, and seeing where I can go now to adapt what is sort of an in-between concept and design aspect, and actually adapt that to a full-on hard image of a human head. So I want to move into Photoshop now. Gone far enough in the sketches that I think it's really going to benefit to have some actual photographic reference that I can start kind of piecing together with an eye towards the sketches that we just came up with. So what I'm going to do now is pull up Photoshop. So I'm going to start with a profile, right? Let me open this up a little bit more. And here's a funny thing, that all my drawings were the opposite profile. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to flop this over horizontally. So now I'm looking at the same profile, which is handy. And the other thing I do when I'm when I'm doing Photoshop design stuff like this is I just want to go to black and white. So I will, and there's obviously different ways to do this, and I'm sure I'm going to get an earful how I'm doing it the wrong way here. But I'm just going to drop this down to black and white. Why? Because I don't want to deal with color right now. I just want to deal with forms as you would in sculpture. I just want to deal with forms in terms of light and shadow. So that's what we'll do now in Photoshop. Okay, so here's my guy, right? Here's Eric, and I think the first thing I do also, because I'm worried about messing things up, is I always do a duplicate of my background layer down here, and I just start working off of that. I'll also create a new layer, which I'll call my black layer, and I'll tell you why in a second. Because what I want to do now is, where's my little paintbrush? Paint buckets under there. So I go to my black layer, and I'm just going to fill that black, and I'm going to drop it underneath the copy of Eric's layer. So here's what I'm going to look. Here's my other disclaimer is this is not a Photoshop lesson. I probably know less about Photoshop than you do. I think the first thing I want to do, just to be a little bit bold, is to pull off the top of his head. I'm actually going to pull off a little bit less than I would have otherwise done. This is the wrong way. That's a little better. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that, right? But I just want to kind of go more to a black background, I think. Okay, so now you can see what we got going here. Right here's this. This is kind of the angle I'm looking at. I think I also want to. Let me just adjust this level a little bit because it's a little bit hot on his face. This is the wrong way. That's a little better. Okay, so now I don't want to jump right to the head too much, but what I want to do is now I want to start bringing out the forms of the skull. And again, because this is still design, this is not necessarily the actor we would use. It's not necessarily the final product. What I want to do is, because we're still in design, I want to create that bridge between what the very earliest concept was and then the sort of semi-refined sketches. I want to kind of create that bridge that will tell us photographically whether or not the concept's working. So what I'm going to do is I've got some other reference photos here. I'm going to pull up a skull. You can see a nice profile skull. Wow, that's pretty. That's kind of cool. Obviously, it's not it's not a modern man, but I'm just going to grab this real quick. Right. Edit, copy. I don't need this. Edit. So I'm going to drop this in over top, and let me lose. Looking for my magic wand. This is the wrong way. Let me shrink this down too. I just want to shrink this down to a more manageable size. Let's start with that. Get rid of the rest of this background. I'm going to change that. Okay, look, let me put the skull underneath the head. Let me make the head a little bit transparent. And now let me grab this skull picture. I just want to get the skull down to the same size as the human head. Let's try that. It's not bad. Let me see if I just keep slide this back a little bit more. Okay, so look, this isn't going to be perfect. I want to kind of get through the basics of this with you. I'm just trying to I'm just trying to get that skull under there because there's a certain structure there that I want to make apparent. Let me put a okay, so if you understand, right? So the picture of our model's on top, the skull's underneath, and what I want to do now is go in and just start erasing a little bit of the top layer, which is basically like, you know, it's going to be like erasing skin. Sort of make this kind of medium big, and I want it kind of really soft edges. And again, like I said, Photoshop is a great tool, and you can spend so much time learning so much. It's very user and learner friendly. Okay, so let's see. So I've got a little bit of transparency here, and actually do a little bit less than that. And this is the best part, right? Multiple undos. Multiple step backwards. Okay, so let me drop this opacity down a little bit. This is the opacity of my eraser, so I don't want to erase so much of the upper image just yet. But I can go in here, and what's happening now are all of the shadows from the skull as they start to come through. It just helps to create that really emaciated look. Do a little bit here in the nose. I don't want to really take tissue away from the nose, but I could certainly help shade it. And again, I'm not looking to duplicate a human skull. I'm just looking to create this sort of archetypes, this sort of structural elements that that will read as deteriorated. Okay, so you can see that's pretty fast. That's pretty simple. Let's see. What else would I do? Let me kill this. This is good. This piece of the skull sticking out here. I think I'm just going to grab that and drop it down to flatten it out. So again, I like to copy things. I'm going to duplicate that. So let me take this one, right? I want to kind of match the color of this to this, because even though this is some kind of an ancient skull, it's going to become the skin surface. It's got a cool texture. That'll certainly work for this level of design. So let me see if I can. I like doing things through levels too, and I'll tell you why I like it. It's the only way I've learned. So let's see, what Photoshop version have you got here? You've got Liquify. Let's go a little bit bigger with the brush. Ooh, not that big. That's folly. Push density, that's good. Okay, so we push this down. Push this down. Let's try that. Oh, I gotta make this one disappear. That's pretty good. I'm amazing. Now I'm just going to go in here to this layer of Eric, which is on top. I just want to kind of massage the edge here a little bit with the eraser. Wow. Okay, so that's cool, right? Let's also just give myself a little more room here to work eventually on the hairline. And actually, let me do this too. I'm going to go back to my black layer because I've lost the definition of his hair, which is not so important to have the hair, but I do need to see the general form of the head. So I'm going to change that to this. So I want to take this skull area, which is now skin area, just because I say so, and I want to bring it down. So I highlight that layer, I get my little cloning tool. I need a little more than that, and that's probably pretty good. Let's try that. I go to my background copy, which is Eric, and I take my eraser, and I'm just going to take some of this away. Actually, that could take too long, so let me just bump this up a little bit more. See? That's what we're looking for. Huh? Okay, not bad. Now, so we got the general shape going there. I think what I'll do is, let me zoom in a little bit here. I want to kind of fix that brow up a little bit. It looks like I chopped out a little bit too much. So rather than cut his brow back, I want to bring part of that skull forward. So I'll do this, and I will make a copy. And I'll paste it down, and I'll bring that forward to about like that. And then I'm going to rock it back. And like I said, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. I love rotating. I love bringing this little center thing down here. Bring this back like this to line that up. Bring it a little bit further forward. And then I'll just use the erase tool to kind of blend things together. Actually, let me go back. I'm kind of lining this up. I'm going to leave that little divot there. I just got to get rid of that little blackish area. And I think, unless I miss my guess, can I clone that now? Let's see. Looks like I can. See, so drop that there. Clean up the edge later. Hey, this is cool. I'm kind of digging that texture in there. And let's see what we can do now about... Let me zoom out for a second. Screen again. I'm going to work on the back here just a little bit. I want to try to get this shape down. And ultimately, I think what I'll do with the hair is I'll probably just go online and try to look for some long hair to lay that into place. But for now, that gives me a better idea of the shape. Okay, so I'm going to go to Google here. I'm going to do some images. I'm going to try male long hair. Ooh, I'll spell it correctly. Long hair. Let's do profile. Let's start with exactly what I want. This is interesting. I'm just looking for some hair pieces, right? I'm not looking for a complete hairstyle, but and I usually just click on it, and then I right-click, and I do a save image as, and I'm going to drop it here into my reference folder. And then I'm going to go back because I saw a couple of other pieces that might be useful. This one looked like it might be good. And I'm not too concerned about file size. Again, this is concept work. I'm not trying to make it look as if it's all photographically perfect yet. Save image as. So I'll drop this into the same folder. And let me just grab one more. I may or may not use it, but it looked like it could be handy. Let's look at Iggy Pop, because there's an element. He's got great facial structure too, right here. Right, that's excellent. Why don't we just hire Iggy Pop? Oh, I know why. Looking for profile. May be able to use. This is excellent, right here. I see one here that might be useful, just to grab some pieces from. And like I said, it's better to grab too much and not use it than to have to keep coming back and forth. This one. Okay, so I'm going to grab this, save image as and let me just try one more, which is Mick Fleetwood. Might be something there. I'm going to grab this one. Save image. Save to the same folder. And then I can get out of this for now. Get back to this. Okay, so let me just pull up a couple of these images of hair. Okay, so I'm going to grab just the hair is all I need, right? So I select it, I do a copy, I just close that out, and I do a paste, which drops in on top, and then I'm going to open another one here. Okay, open Iggy Pop, and again I grab my selection tool. I really just want this long chunk of hair here, so I do a edit copy, close this. I don't need to save it, I just want to close it, and I do another edit paste. And right now I'm just trying to get all of these assets up here on the screen so I can use them. Yeah, this one. Okay, let's see, select this much. And paste. And let me grab one more piece here. This one. And once again, select, copy, close this file, and paste. Alright, so what we'll do, I'm just going to start with this one here on top. This to the top, layer 6, is that right? Double click this little eyeball, yeah, that's the one I want. So I'm going to turn off these other hair layers for now. Just concentrate on this one to start. I'm going to do a transform and scale to get closer to the right size to start with. And I hold the shift key while I pull these corner pieces, and that will keep the proportions constrained so they don't change. I also want to flip this horizontally. So go to transform, flip horizontal, because I want it facing the right way. And let me also just change this top layer's transparency to about 60%. So now I can see the hair and I can see the underlying work so far on the model's head. So let's find a place here. Since the hair layer here has got this guy looking up, I'm going to line up the back of his head with the back of the head on our character, and I'm going to rotate him down. And once I'm going to rotate, this mark here in the center is what you rotate around. So since I've got the back of the head lined up, I'm going to drop that rotating center. It's like basically putting a pin in right there. I come out here outside of the boundary box, and as I click and pull it down, I can rotate the head down, so you can see it's now on the same kind of level of expression. So I hit enter to save that, and then I also want to make it a little bit bigger, so I'm back to transform and scale, and holding down my shift key and grabbing this corner and pulling this down. And right now I'm just looking at the nose, I'm looking at the eye. When it looks like they're about the same size, then maybe I'll stop. Let's try that. And let me slide it back up into place. Looks like I can go bigger. So I do it again, transform, scale. And like I said, you really can't go wrong with Photoshop because you can always undo. So I will scale. I'm going to hit my shift key. I'm going to pull this back. I'm watching the eye and the nose again. That looks pretty close there. Let me just grab this top level, which again is the hair level, and that looks pretty good. So so now looking here, you can see underneath this hair layer, this is great because we get such a strong contrast between this white head here and this dark hair shape here. That bleeds through pretty well, and I can see that and kind of line up all of this hair from this downward. I can line that up with where I'm going to lay it. And this is interesting too. You see a piece of his ear here underneath. I can line that up with our reference model's ear. And I'm going to go back to my top layer again. I'm now going to make it 100% opaque. So now all I'm seeing is the hair layer. So let me just zoom in on this a little bit and get my eraser here. And what I want to do now is I want to erase this face, and I want to go down to our face underneath. So I'm up here at 100% opacity. I'm going to go a little bit bigger. You can see here it's 82%, so that means it isn't a real hard edge around the perimeter of the circle. But if I take all of this away, just want to keep the hair. I'll keep the jacket for now too, just as a reference. So there's our guy underneath. And this is interesting. Let me go back and just to test some things here. I want to make this top layer semi-transparent again. Actually, let me just click on and off. And right now, I'm just watching this little earlobe down here to see if that lines up, only to tell me if the back of the hair would line up, and that looks pretty good. So I can also go to semi-transparency on the hair layer. I can see my highlighted area here, so I know I don't want any hair up there, so I'm free to take this all the way up here and here in the front, and get rid of this edging here a little bit too. And let me just go to full opacity now, and let me take the color out of this image too, right? I go down and desaturate it. Right, so that's black and white. Let me zoom out just a little bit. I just want to take a minute here and do a little bit of cleanup, so we don't have a bunch of weird crap hanging around. Let me erase all this stuff. I'm going to leave the hair, even though it's a little bit further than what we need right now. Like I said, I'm just going to leave that collar just so I have a little bit of a point of a reference. Right, but I can leave back here. Okay. So where do I want to go next? Let's I know this isn't the exact length of hair I want, but it's the density. It has a nice fall to it right here. So I'm going to continue to play with this a little bit. I'm going to slide this a little bit more into position. I'm really focusing back here. I'm not too worried about the front here just yet. But I can drop this down. This is actually here in the front. This is kind of framing it in about the place I want it anyway. So I'm not sure how we lost that. I'm going to click this layer on and off, and let's just watch this earlobe. So the hair is much further forward than our guy. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the same layer, right? I'm going to go to my transform, and I'm going to go to scale. And this time I'm not going to push my shift button because I only want to squeeze it in this direction. So I'm going to grab this side button over here, push it to the left. You can see how it's getting, I'm not changing the height, I'm just changing the length, and push a little from the front. And I'm going to hit enter just to save that, and I'm going to grab it, slide it around. Okay, so now what I'm doing now here is I'm lining up the back like I had it. But you can see now the front is more in the correct line. I haven't changed the way it falls or the way it looks. And if I watch this earlobe while I click this on and off, I'm much closer, at least in terms of the vertical direction. I'm still a little bit lower. So now here the question is, do I really want to chase that? It doesn't really matter too much to me, but let's just try it because it's just a couple of clicks. I do another edit, transform, scale, and this time I'm going to leave the side to side alone. I'm not going to push the shift button. I'm just going to push down from the top. So I push this down a little bit. Let's see if that works. I'm going to grab the whole thing, slide it back up into place, see where that earlobe lines up. And it's still a little bit longer, but I'm leaving it because I kind of like it and I want to move on. Okay, so I've got this part here. I'm just going to grab my eraser. I'd like to pull some of this out of the way too. This is maybe a little fluffier than I want it right now, but let's leave it for now. Let's go to the front of this hairpiece and pull off the skin level here a little bit. And I think to get closer into this hair, let's zoom in. Okay, so, and as you can tell, look, this isn't a real high resolution photo. We're still talking about design. We're still talking about some sketchy things. I'm going to go back to my eraser. I'm going to make it a little smaller. I'm going to make it a little less hard around the edges so we have a little bit more of a softer perimeter. And I'm also going to drop the opacity down to about half. And that way I can kind of go in and pull out pieces here now without making it look too defined. Down here a little bit. I'm not crazy about the sideburns, so I'll lose that. And I'm just going to soften some of this up here on top too, so it's not so straight. And what I'm trying to do right now, again, I'm not completely refining the edge just yet, but I do want to break it up just a little bit. It's like trying to bring all the elements together, all along the same level of what's really finished and what's not. Like that. Okay, now let me zoom out again. Okay, just because it's kind of distracting to me right now to still have this edging here, I want to go in and pull that out. So I need to make sure I go down and highlight the proper layer, which is down here. I'm going to take my opacity back up to 100%, but I'm going to leave the edging kind of soft. You can see part of the skull sticking out now here in the front, which I'll take care of in just a second. So I'm going to go back to this skull image that I'm using, which is down here, this layer 1 copy. I know it's because it's the only one that's lit to be seen, and I can erase that away from underneath. So I'm going to go back to layer number 2 now. I'm going to take my eraser, right? I'm going to go back, I'm going to make the edge 100% hard so it's not softened, and I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, obviously there's still a long way to go. Let's move ahead though and just continue to scope out the overall concept, which was, again, we're talking about this long-haired kind of look. So I'm liking the way all this hair is working up here. Like I said, I like the density up here. So now what we need to do is come up with something here at the bottom. So let me go back and let me do a file and open. Yeah, I'm going to do this one. Okay, so what I like about this is the way this hair is all broken off. And you can tell this is not a profile, this is more 3/4, but I have a feeling that this would probably work pretty well. So I right-click. Sorry, I'm going to do select. I'm going to take my square box, and I'm just going to grab the part that I need again. And I'm going to do an edit, copy. I'm going to close this file, back to this file, back to my working file. I'm going to do edit, paste. I'm going to see this highlighted layer over here. I'm going to move that to the very top. So that's now on top of everything else. I'm going to move it over to the right. I'm going to make it black and white by going to my adjustments, going to my hue and saturation, and dropping the saturation down to 0 or -100. Now I've got to size this up. So go to Edit, go to Transform, go to Scale. I want to keep the parameters right now. The perspective proportion is the same, so I'm going to hit my Shift key, pull this open, hit Enter to save it, slide it up, and that's starting to look like it's about the right length and the right finish. So now let me go into this picture completely on its own, grab my eraser. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to leave the edge sharp, and I'm going to start taking away the parts that I don't want to use. And here's something, I mean, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Magic Wand, I'm going to take the tolerance, I don't want to lower it, from 80 down to about 20. And when I click on the skin area here, I can start to remove those particular light and dark values without taking it out of the hair itself. And this is getting pretty close, at least close enough to drop it in and see how it's looking. Alright, let me just grab my eraser, and you can see all these little bits here that are, whoops, do my select, deselect. I want to just clean up some of these little floating bits that are still out here that the magic wand didn't grab because they were no longer connected. Okay, let me grab my arrow and pull the hair piece over here. I actually kind of like working in there. Okay, now here's something that's kind of cool. You can kind of see the line that this hair is creating, right? It's sort of along the lines of some of the directional lines I was throwing in my really rough concept stuff, where I want it to have a little bit of flow. I don't want it to just hang straight down from the side, like a Herman Munster kind of thing. I just want to have a little bit more style. So I'm going to leave that right where it is. I'm going to copy this layer because I think I can use it a few times. So just hit Duplicate. And here's what I'm going to do now over here on my layer side so that I don't lose track. This layer that I just copied, I'm going to just call this, rename it Long Hair 2. And the one under it, which was the original one, I'm going to just call this Long Hair 1. And then hopefully I can keep track of them a little bit better. I'm going to turn off Long Hair 2 for now. I just want to deal with Long Hair 1. And what I want to do is just make sure it's really, I'm going to slide it around and make sure it's really the best place. Just bump it up a little. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to lose this part up here because I prefer the way the underneath hair is coming in. So I just want to add a little bit of this over top. Get back into the right place. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to grab my eraser. I'm going to start taking this away until I get this far. And once I'm this far with it, I'm going to go back. I'm going to soften my edge on the eraser. And I'm going to start. You can see over here, I'm just taking off a little bit of this highlight, which is looking a little bit strange. And you can see these sort of broken marks down here. That's sort of something that's left from the magic wand, but at this scale it's more about textures. I don't need the actual detail, so I'm just going to grab my eraser and I'm just going to make my eraser smaller. I'm just going to go in here and just get rid of some of that and let the rest of it just kind of fall into the tangles of everything underneath. Now if I go to the top here and I grab this other long hair level and make that visible and grab this, what I want to do now is pull this down basically want to start filling in this area now with longer hair. So I'm going to drop this in here. Oh, let me just actually do this. You can see all this stuff over here yet that I didn't get rid of. Let me grab my magic wand again. I select it and I delete it. Select and delete, select and delete. This is the way to get rid of the biggest, bulkiest stuff, and you can do this to any degree of fineness that you want to, depending on the project, but this is going to go quickly this way. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my eraser. I just want to get rid of these white pieces here that will end up contrasting with his dark hair and become kind of distracting. Again, I'm not too concerned about saving all the little filamenty hairs. Those can always be salvaged, you know, by taking a lot more time than what I'm doing right now, or they can be painted in later, or a combination of the two things. I'm going to grab my direction arrows here. I'm going to pull this hair over, and you can see if I drop it in right here, it becomes really obvious that you're just, you know, copying and pasting. So what I'm going to try to do, let's see, to break that up first, let's go to Edit, Transform, and let's just flip it horizontally, which means it just flips side to side. And then I can drop it down here. So the thing that's interesting is now I've got some nice texture on that I can add to this side. So I'm going to drop this, let's just say here, it's not the right angle though, right? We still want to keep this underlying feeling of this nice S-curve, which is a nice flow line. So I'm going to drop this down here. I'm going to edit this with transform. I'm going to rotate it again. I'm going to grab my rotational center here, which it's hard to see right down here. I actually want it to rotate from about here. Basically, I want to drop my pin there. I bring the cursor to the outside of my boundary box, and I start rotating it down this way. And that's now you can see this kind of line here. It becomes more of the angle I want. So I'm going to hit enter to lock that. I'm going to grab it with my arrow, and I'm going to pull it down this way a little bit. And now I'm going to grab my eraser. All of this up here is completely in the way, so I'm going to make my eraser bigger. I'm going to leave it kind of soft edged. And I'm going to start pulling this away, revealing the flow of the hair underneath, which is what I wanted to maintain. So I think you can see the outside of my cursor. I'm just dropping and letting this all kind of blend in. There's still too much highlight here. I'm going to lose this piece here, and a little bit of this over here on the left. And now what's starting to work is that we still have an overall line of hair, but now we've got another piece that's coming down this way, and I can help that a little bit more along the line by creating that angle I want. Make my eraser a little smaller. Now as I look at this, obviously up here we need a little detail. We still need detailing all along the hairline, and this needs to be blended in a little bit more. So since this has some great textures and great lines, I'm going to copy it once more. I'm just going to call it long hair 3. Move this to the top, slide it over, and what I'm looking for is just something to help kind of tie these together. So I see some good shapes right in here. So I'm going to take my selection tool. I'm just going to draw a big box here. Delete that, and I'm going to delete it down here at the bottom for now, and I'm going to grab my select button to deselect. I'm going to grab my eraser. I'm going to take some of this off up here. Not too much just yet. And now I'm going to drop this piece down here in the front. And let me move this out of the way. This piece here is what I want to salvage. So I think that's long hair 2. Let's see if I click this on and off. Okay, that's long hair 2. So let me take this layer, which is long hair 3, right? And drop it down underneath long hair 2, which now allows me to take this edge and slide it under this piece that I like. So I can do this. And you can kind of see now what it's helping to kind of mat that all together. These white pieces up here, I'm just going to grab my eraser. I'm just going to knock these out. I'm going to get rid of this straight edge here. I'm going to lose all of it up here. And some of these dark edges down into here. And then it's not too bad. This piece right here looks like it would be great to have this swing up this way. And I'm just going to double check that it's layer number 2. And what I'll do is, since I want to push this end up, I'm going to go back up to filter and I'm going to go to liquefy. And what I'm going to do, this is the piece that I wanted to push up. So I'm going to take my brush size, I'm going to make it smaller. And I'm just going to get down here, select it, and push up just a little bit like this. I'll do a little same. I'm going to pull some of this down here this way. And let's hit OK. And so you can see what it's done is drop this in. It hasn't quite turned this up the way I want, so let's try it this way too. When I hit edit and transform and come down and just do a distort, I can kind of grab some of these and pull these out different ways. And that's pretty good for blocking in here for now. I'm looking at a couple of things here, and I think in all the intense excitement of working on this hair, I've slid part of this eye socket forward because this isn't quite the right look. So let me just confirm that it's down here in this skull layer, which it is, right? Now the nice thing is that this skull layer is giving me this great top piece here. So I'm going to lose it down here. I'm going to take my eraser. I'm going to go back and I'm going to erase my skull layer. And because we had adjusted some of the translucency of Eric's face underneath, that is actually starting to reveal some of our background here. So now I wanted to take this skull, which was the original one, right? And I'm just going to keep the front part of it. So I've selected the front part, and I'm going to go and hit inverse because I want to now take everything that's outside of that boundary box and delete it. And now I can slide it around a little bit. And honestly, I'm not even sure now if I'm really getting too much out of here other than some textures. So let's leave that. Let's also go in and take it off the eye. And this is a little bit distracting, this piece back in here. So I'm going to pull that back. I'm also going to knock the opacity of this eraser down a little bit because I just want to softly take away some of these shapes now. Just a little bit heavy. Let's jump to the eye now because this to me is an important aspect of this character. And so I want to take this eyelid and I want to work on this dead eye look. And there's a number of ways to do it. You can get different pictures, you can paint it on, but what I want to do is select this layer, which is our background layer. I want to take my selection tool. I'm just going to basically outline Eric's existing eyelid. I'm not worried about the lashes. I'm thinking this thing might not even have lashes. So I've outlined it. I want to do an edit copy and an edit paste. And then I want to try sliding it down. And the nice thing about this is that I can now extend his eyelid. I'll clean it up, but I'm basically preserving all of the same lights and shadows, so it's not quite as much building. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to take this and I'm going to line up the top of it so it's still the same. I'm going to go to my edit transform and rotate, I'm going to take my center pin, I'm going to drop it in up here in the top corner because that's lined up the way I want it. I just want it to kind of swell out at the bottom, and I grab this, rotate it down this way. You can see how much of the eye I'm now cutting off with the lid. And that's a pretty good leading angle, I think. And then what I'll do is also take this, I'm still on this same piece, I double check it by clicking this eye on and off over here at the layer side, so I can make sure I'm working with the right layer I want. I'm going to take my my scale, and I'm just going to pull it out side to side a little bit to fatten it up. Maybe a little up and down, I guess. Right? And let me slide it back into position. And I'm going to rotate it a little bit more too. Slide my pin up to the corner that I want to keep, and bring this down. And now I'm going to grab my eraser, and I'm going to take away this overlap that I don't need down here at the bottom. Maybe just a little bit here at the top. And now, because I've got the structure the way I want, but it's just not as obvious, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to grab my dodging tool, which is cool. This is great. This is like traditional photography, where it's the equivalent of holding out some of the light that would be exposing this image if it was a traditional paper image. Let me pull the size of this down a little bit, bring the hardness up a little bit, and exposure is 50. So watch, what will happen is now as I hit this piece, you see it's lightening it up, and what I'm trying to do is lighten it up so it has the same lightness value as this hot spot in front of it. And obviously I can only lighten up the piece I just did. I have to go back to the original layer here called the background copy and do the same to that to help kind of match those, bring them together. And by the same token, this is a great tool too. Over here, the burn tool is exactly the opposite. This applies additional light to whatever area you hit. I'm going to bring up the hardness a little bit, and exposure is 50. So basically, this is darkening what's already there. You can see skin detail is actually coming out. And I'm a little bit close. Let me back this out just a little bit. I'm going to start structuring the face a little bit. Make this a little smaller. And basically, wherever I want to take this and start creating a little more shadow, this would be the equivalent of what you would do with makeup on a final character. It doesn't necessarily change the forms right now. I'm changing the lights and the shadows and the highlights and shadows. But as I go in a little bit deeper and a little bit broader, that would start to necessitate some kind of a build-up on the face. But again, this is all in an effort to make the character look a lot less healthy than what our model is, and a little more emaciated. And nice thing is, if you get it a little bit too heavy, you can always go back and adjust it. I just don't make sure there's not real specific hard-edged lines anywhere. Interesting thing about the eyebrow, which I haven't really decided on yet, is whether or not I want to take the eyebrows away. Again, in an effort not to just copy the Karloff thing, I'm sort of drawn towards keeping them. The only reason I would take them away is thinking in terms of the decomposition of a human body. You know, as hair falls away, I could see that being a strong point for the eyebrows going away, but then I don't know how to justify all the hair on the head, and maybe I don't have to. But again, since it's a conceptual stage, probably the best thing to do is look at it both ways. So I do a file save before I go much further. And let's see, what would be the best way to do this? I'll take my background copy, confirm that's the one I'm still working with, and let's duplicate this so I don't mess up the only layer that I've got that I've been doing work on. And using this duplicate layer, I'll go to my cloning tool, and I'm just going to clone this skin area above and paint it right over top of the eyebrow, because it'll kind of make me a quick way to put it together. So I hit my Alt key, grab this and drop it here, grab it up here and drop this down here, grab this up here, which I'm probably off of our layer and onto the skull. Yeah, I am, because I've already taken away that much. So I'm actually just going to grab from back here again, slide this up, grab this again, drop this here in the front. Just try one more right here. And what I can do is drop a little more in here too. And one more here. And now the nice thing about this is it's quick, and it's it's an easy way to see if I by clicking, actually, if I turn this layer on and off, I can go back and forth between the brow. And like I said, I'm not sure there's an element about that. I think the fact that this brow is still here helps to make this more of a stranger reveal, because I think when the brow goes away, it suddenly feels like it's just a guy wearing a rubber headpiece, and it doesn't quite seem as graphic. You know, this is kind of a building it as we go, right? I think now, not sure where this layer, I think this might be our hair layer. Let's take a look at doing some more refinements. Let's take a minute, do a little bit of cleanup. I got some area here that's probably left over, I'm guessing, from one of these hair layers, maybe? Oh, this is going to be interesting. There it is. Right there, okay. So I make sure that layer's highlighted. I grab my eraser and I go down here and start to back some of that away. What I'm really looking at right now as I do this is I want to keep this jawline pretty straight. If it got too many ups and downs, it starts to look very weak, and I want to kind of restore some strength there. It's actually kind of good there. I think that works. Let's see, where else? I want to clean up. Let's look at this hair up here. I'm just wondering now, well, let me find out which layer it is. Okay, it's the same layer. I think I want to just try backing this in a little bit more. That feels a little better to me. And again, like I said, you know, you take some real time with this. There's no reason why you couldn't just grab some strands of hair out of here and drop them in. Or, you know, look here, let me look at this real quick. And let's take my my eyedropper here. Again, I'm not sampling colors, I'm sampling lights and darks because I'm in black and white. But let's drop this piece right there. So now I know exactly what that tone is, and I go to my paintbrush, and let's see, that's a pretty big line. So I want to make the size smaller. I want to make it a little bit harder. It's still pretty big. And that's just a touch small. Let's say we drop it and make it 2 pixels big. Oh, and here's what I want to make sure. I'm going to do a separate layer just for this little test. I'm going to call it Painted Hairs. I'll even spell it right. And I'm going to put this right on the top. And this is just an experiment. I just want to see if this is even... I don't know that I want to spend the time right now getting into this, but obviously it's a choice that you can choose to do. I'm just going to drop in some highlight pieces here. And then I can go up into, again, I'm still on the same layer. The only thing on this layer are these little hair pieces I just added. And I can go up to my filter and come down to blur. and do this Gaussian blur and move this out of the way. The higher I slide this, the more blurred they become. You can see they start to take on the same characteristic as the photographed hair. So that's one way to drop in some more textures. Let's see what else. Let's straighten this up. Maybe we can try to lay a scar in here while we're at it. So I still want to go back to my my main hair layer, which is this one. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I'm going to take my eraser. I'm going to take it, make it much smaller. And I want to try to break up this line a little bit more. Increase the opacity there a little bit. This is just helping to break it up. The idea is that this line was created by shaving the head and sewing tissue together, but what I don't want to do, I don't want to make it look like it's so straight and perfect and there's just an immediate density change, because in reality, once this is created as a makeup prosthetic or a wig, there would be a nice hand-tied segue to make that happen. So I'm kind of cheating here. I'm letting it lay down into this soft blurry image of hair. See this thing right here I just noticed? This is off of one of the hair layers, and while I'm at it, there's the layer. I'm going to highlight this layer. I just want to go and break up that straight line a little bit. Because while it's great to go into concept work just grabbing, cutting, and pasting, you've just got to make sure that you're not leaving weird artifacts that get kind of clunky looking. Before I get into too much detail, I want to just rough out the form. Let me go down to these layers. Okay, so this is the layer I want to affect right now, this skull layer. So I highlighted that. I'm going to go into my my burning tool because I want to make it a little bit darker. I'm going to cheat the size way down small. The edges are really soft. Make it very very translucent. Let me just see. That was a little too slight. See what I'm doing is wherever I put this cursor and push, I'm trying to darken it and find the right level of how dark to go. Okay, so what I'm doing here now, by laying in this dark line, I just want to start sketching in where this scar can be. It's going to be a combination, like I said, of places that are raised and places that are kind of dug in. So now I've got a little bit of shadow going. I can go back to my my dodge tool, which is lightening it, and if I go on either side of that tool, let me make it smaller. If I take this tool and go on either side of that earlier line, I can now start to add some highlights to start giving it a feeling that we're building up some kind of a scarred tissue. And again, I'm not thinking of big crisscrossing lines. I think it's a little too cartoony, but I am definitely looking at what is more of a dissection type suture, which is made quick and broad, and it's usually sloppy, and it's not ever intended to bring skin together so that it can grow back, because it's usually done, you know, as an autopsy or part of a dissection, and that's where you get that kind of heavy rolled effect of the skin, and that's what I really want to go for when I get into this part. Now there's some other weird things over here. I still have to see this highlighted piece of hair, so before I just start chopping into it, I want to zoom out a little bit and Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that go away, so we've got to find out what layer it is. There it is. By turning the layers on and off, I can find the layer. So I highlight that layer, I grab my eraser, I see this line here I want to get rid of eventually. It's the right layer, and I can tighten up my eraser along the edge a little bit more. I can bring up the opacity, because I just want that to start disappearing. And because it is kind of a highlight, we may want to just go in and add some more hair to it later. I think what I want to do now is, because I got so many layers, I want to start kind of working with this whole thing as a single piece. But I don't want to lose the opportunity to go back and fine tune, again, depending on how much time I have to put into this. So what I will do is I'm going to highlight this top layer over here on the right, and I'm going to go down to the very bottom. I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to hit my shift key, click again, so now everything is highlighted. I'm going to right click in here, I'm going to duplicate these layers, and then I'm going to name them. So now you see here at the top, everything here that's called a copy, all the way down here, all that blue stuff is now the copy. Down here the non-blue stuff is my original layers. So I can, with 100% security, I can right click, and I'm going to merge these layers. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to turn off every one of these layers, one of these original layers, leaving only the fresh merged copy layer. And why? I'll show you why. Because now when I click this on and off, that's my whole picture. And here's why I did that. Because now what I want to do is give myself a little more room to work with here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Wrong way, zoom out a little bit. I'm just looking at the overall proportion of this. And yes, I chopped out some head up here, but it still looks very long to me in this direction. And it's funny because a lot of my drawings kept coming out that way. So one of two things, either it was just a weird lucky thing that it was a weird coincidence that it came out as wide as my drawings, or it really should be that way. But in any case, just because it's a concept and because I can explore it, I'm going to transform, scale this whole image all is a combination of layers, and I'm not going to constrain the proportions. In other words, I'm just going to grab it from the side and squish it to make it a little more narrow. And I feel like as I'm doing more of this, it's starting to feel, I don't know, I look at that and that to me is starting to feel a little bit more accurate. Let's go back the opposite direction, right? I don't know. The main thing I guess to watch is I'm looking at the overall proportion of the head, right? I'm liking it that it's better, that it's becoming a little more narrow. I just have to watch up here between the relationship between the eye and the nose, because I can't cheat what a real human being is not. So obviously if I go that far, we're not going to get that. But I'll bet I could go somewhere in there, and that gives me a better pleasing overall proportion. So I'm going to say yes to that. I'm going to, I notice that here I'm past my background, which is not too big a deal because I think I'm going to simplify this even more. Take my magic wand here on the left, click on the gray, and see down here in the nose how it's catching under the nose? It's because I'm grabbing too many similar colors. So let me change my tolerance. Let me try 10. Click again. All right, that's better. You can see it's just removing all of this background area. So I can do, there's a little piece of something up here that I want to get rid of. Okay, so now basically what I've got is this thing floating, and with no background. So what I will do is create a new layer, and I'm going to slide this under the layer that I'm using right now, which is the face and the hair all together, right? And I want to add some color just so I have something to look at. So actually maybe this color right here is not so bad. I'm going to say yes to that, and I take my paint bucket I'm going to fill this. Yeah, that works for me. And sorry, and then see this area back here? I've got all this white stuff down here. Let me grab my eraser and let me highlight this correct layer. And I'm going to erase this extra stuff. Just take it out of there, remove it. Here's what I was really having fun with, I think, when I started working on that scar. So let us, again, in the interest of getting as much of this concept stuff across in the period of time that we've got, let's start working out the scar down in here. And here's an alternative. A couple of things I could have done is I could have actually built this whole scar up here. But remember, I started this scar back here on the head. I could have built this whole thing on its own separate layer, which with a little more time would have been a time savings in the long run, because then I could take that layer, I could turn it vertical, I could lay it in here and drop it in. But since I don't have that element created, let me just go in again with the burn tool and the dodge tool. And I'm going to start with the burn tool. I just want to darken the area in first. And I want to go from almost as if it's gone up here behind the ear. And I don't want to just draw a straight line because it's not a flat thing. There's folds, and let me see if there's an area here. For example, let me zoom in a little bit more and show you what I'm talking about. I want to, wow, that's too close. Okay, so let me grab my burn tool again. So I'm doing a kind of a little arc here. That may be a little bit too fat. That's 11 pixels. I'm going to shut it down to about 6. Okay, so then this kind of curves in under the jaw, and then it could come across the neck like this. And I don't want to just do a complete unbroken line. I want to have certain aspects of this. And again, the idea that it would come down the neck a certain way, and then it would start to angle down towards the center of the chest to become that autopsy scar. So I've got that much going on. Let me zoom in a little bit more. And let me take my burn tool, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make it a little bit sharper edged. And I'm just going to go in. Now it's some of these areas that I've already done. And I just want to add a little more depth by adding a little more of a black line to places of it. So I'm not really thinking so much of drawing a specific line as much as just making it a shadowed indent. And this, look, I'm doing this with a mouse. You're going to get much better results if you get yourself a tablet of one kind or another. And I do have a Wacom tablet. I just haven't hooked it up. Not because I don't care. I just didn't. So I'm hoping you can see this. I mean, I'm doing some pretty fine stuff right now. Oops, there's a line, a stray line I didn't want, so you come Command Z and just erase it. And let's start there with the dark stuff. We can always go back and forth. I'm going to come back over here to my tools. I'm going to go from the burn tool to the dodge tool. I'm going to leave the size as it was before. My exposure's at 50. Let me just drop this in and see if that's a pretty good rate right there, just in terms of size. And I'm going to do a combination of slight, like, raised bumps as well as pulling it and doing lines as well. And the goal is to make it so irregular that it doesn't just read like a straight. The worst thing to do, obviously, here on the side is to just do this, right? So there you have a long unbroken line, and it doesn't look like it's got any form to it. I'm going to Command Z and get rid of it. It doesn't look like it has any form to it. It just looks like a painted line. And what I'm trying to do is, by selectively hitting areas, is make this thing look like raised, bumpy scar tissue. And the bumps are created by what was originally sutures that pull the skin down inside. And I think I said this. If not, the idea behind this, the heavy sutures, are that these were never intended to be on a person that was ever going to heal. These were like to close up an autopsy scar and all that kind of stuff. Here's what I like about using this kind of a tool instead of painting, is as I get up here into this dark area, if I was just painting, if I could easily pull the value of this light tone and just start painting it. But because I'm using this burn tool or this dodging tool, I'm actually lightening up the existing exposure. So as you can see, like up here, this isn't quite as bright as it is down here because I'm starting with a darker base. So to me, this is just such a fast and it admittedly kind of a loose approach, but that's what we're looking for right now in terms of concept. We're not looking at anything that's going to go to the screen and lock the character look in for good right now. I'm just trying to come up with something that is a few steps above what those earlier loose sketches were. So I'm kind of liking where this is going just in terms of size. I'm going to go back and grab my burn tool once more because I want to darken some of these areas. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And now I want to start adding some shadows back to this side. Oops, that might be a little too much. I'm going to Command Z. I'm going to make this a little less of an exposure. Softer edge. And all I'm trying to do right now, I'm now shadowing the other side to make it look like this highlight is really popping from the skin. And I'm probably trying to drop the center of the of this burn tool right onto the outer line, that white line. So this is starting to work. Let's take a look at a wider shot. Oh, let me darken this first. Right. So you pull that out. Okay, so that definitely tells a story. And yes, I could do the same thing up here. I'm just trying to figure out in terms of resources where the best way of spending my time is. So let's take a look at that and decide how much further to go on this guy. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn off the two new layers, which are basically the composite of everything together. I'm going to go back and I'm going to turn on all of these individual layers. Nope, not that one. That were making up the character. Okay, and let's see, where is this top? I think it's this skull piece here. Okay. Let's do this. I'm going to highlight that layer. I want to play around with that layer. I'm going to start by changing the pitch of it so that when I go back to some of these sketches of mine, these had a really more of a distinct pitch when I compare them to this when I compare them to Photoshop. So let me just play around a little bit. I'm going to go back to rotate. I'm going to take my anchor mark and I'm going to put it back here at the back of the head because I just want to adjust the pitch from the front. Actually, I'm going to put it up here at the high point. And I'm going to start pulling this down in the front. It's interesting. Obviously, I've still got all this mass, which I can't just take away because I still want that to be the actor. The idea that the actor can still bring expression into his forehead so that it's not just a locked off, dead upper head. Maybe that's too far. Let me back it up. Let me actually take it all the way up here once. Actually, as I pull this up, drop this down here. I'm going to say yes to that. I'm going to slide this thing forward. Which I'm kind of liking. You know what it is too? I see this, maybe this line here is just still a little too straight. So let's do a couple of things here. Let's attack that line. Let's take this layer and let's liquefy this through filters. Gonna add a liquefy, and that'll just bring up that layer. And I'm just gonna keep this brush size the way it is. And change the density. I'm gonna bring this up to 100. I just want to start making some of these more irregular shapes. try that. And then let's go back and slide this around a little bit more. I'm looking right now here at the back, right? I'm looking at where this scar was that I built on this layer. And I want to line this up with the hair, not because I think it's the only way to go, but at least it gives me a point that's consistent. There's something kind of cool about this. Now, let's see. I think that this area here needs to be filled in. So I'm going to do that by creating a new layer, because I may ultimately decide that this is too much of a cut back and I may want to drop it. So any changes I want to put on their own separate layer so I can turn it on and off. So let me take this layer and I'm going to go back to the skull layer, okay, which is this. I'm going to highlight that for a second. I'm going to grab that front piece. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to go to this new layer and I'm going to drop it there and paste it. And I'm going to slide it a little bit forward. Let's try it there. And I'm going to clean up the edge with my eraser. A pretty tight edge. And see the skull down here, which is appearing from this layer, from when I rocked it forward. I don't want that showing. I also want to go back and I don't want to lose those eyebrows, so there they are. So I'm going to keep those eyebrows because I think that does add a lot. And the eyelid needs to come back on. Alright, so let's go back to this level of the skull. See this weird shape up here? This just needs to be a little more refined. So I'm going to first, I've got to get rid of this foggy area, which I'm pretty sure is coming off of... Okay. So let me go to this layer and grab my eraser and erase some of this, which is in the way. And now let me go to this new layer, right, which is my new skull area. So I'll start with this one. And all I want to do is take my eraser, right, and I want to make sure I've got kind of a pretty soft edge. And again, there's various ways of doing this. I'm just going to come in and just lightly erase. I'm going to take it a little softer along the edge. I just basically want to fuzz this edge a little bit so it doesn't look so sharp and so distinct. And again, it's all black and white, so this is kind of helping to also envision this as a sculpture, which will be happening later in the process. And let me hit this next layer, which is the front part of it, and do the same thing here. And I got some hard edge happening here, so I want to kind of tweak that a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to take this edge and do the same thing. And then I'm going to go back to this skull area, which is now two separate layers put together, which is this layer and this layer. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to commit to this, and I'll merge them. And by making it one layer like that, I can now address it as a single layer, and I can go back here. I'm going to hit my burn tool. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And all I want to do is just help, so it's not such a nice, smooth, soft, round shape. I just want to add a couple more shadows in here. And like I said, It's not perfect. It gets the concept across. It can definitely get me into sculpture. And let me see if I want to do any more along this hairline. Let's do some quick cleanup here. I've got this, still got this black hazing. Let me get rid of the background and just go in and see if my little magic wand, I have to highlight the layer in question, which is that layer. And that may work pretty well, actually. Let me zoom in so that I can see what I'm doing here. When you get to this scale, everything looks so choppy, but and painted, but I think we'll be all right. That's way too much. Let me hit this. Now I want to deselect, so I go up here, deselect, and I want to look at the whole thing and just touch it up now with the eraser. So anyway, get rid of some of that distraction. Looks a little cleaner. You can focus a little bit better on what the character aspect is. And like I said, there's many more hours that really needs to go into this. But look, my feeling is now, look, I'm at a point now here where I've got a really strong silhouette. It's funny, it's not quite as flat as my drawing, which is nice because I think as you get into other media, for example, the Photoshop, I just found it was a little more conducive to playing around with forms because it wasn't just so much a silhouette. But I feel like I'm at a point now where I can keep going around with this, or I could start moving into clay, which is not to say that this step is ever really done. I can move into clay and start blocking something out, and if I'm not quite finding it in clay, I can always come back to Photoshop. And ultimately, the other end of the design process, when I'm ready to start looking at color design, I will probably take photographs of the sculpture and go back into Photoshop and start playing around with colors in that way. Hey, here's my toolbox. Yeah, it's an old pal professional. And you probably wonder where it came from. This was given to me by my sister, who used it as a trauma kit when she was studying paramedic medicine. Yeah, went from saving lives to creating lives. Let's see how. It works very much like a tackle box. Except this scale, that's not for measuring fish. Oh no, that's for measuring brushes. Steel brushes. Files. And it's more than just a box of tools. It's also a collection of memories. Because inside, down in the basement, is this. My oldest tool. Started life as a butter knife back in 1972. Then it was used as a mold pry, and that's when it took on this characteristic short, blunt look. Dented at the end, use of a hammer. My other old tool is missing. came from the same pattern of silverware. It was a fork. And I took pictures of a mask I made with that fork to Don Post Sr. at Don Post Studios. Oh no, it's not there anymore. But look it up on the internet. Do yourself a favor. Don Post looked at the picture of my alien and he said, "It looks like you sculpted it with a fork." He was right. He was right. All of these slots hold a variety of other tools and mementos. For example, ballpoint pen from a camera store I worked at in North Hollywood when I first moved here to California. Why'd I keep it? Because I read somewhere that Rob Bottin used a ballpoint pen to add pore texture to a sculpture for the thing. I've also got another exciting element to show you that I'm going to share with you right now. It's this. It's baby powder. But I'm not using it for a baby. Baby. Oh no. I'm using it to make monsters. Anyway, enough about the old pal professional. It's time to get back to the lesson. Come on. So the next part of design, look, I like getting into clay as early as possible. With the sketches and the Photoshop work that we've already gone through, I think I'm have more than enough background in this thing to be able to just jump into clay. And what I want to do is, rather than go into full-size sculpture, is to do something small scale, just a head and neck. So I just want to quickly put together an armature. Just something. I'm just going to do a quick wet clay sculpture. You know, wet clay is it's a faster medium than doing an oil clay. It won't last. It's not meant to. It's just supposed to be a quick little study that I can actually see in 3 dimensions. And what I'm hoping is that once I get into 3 dimensions, I'm able to really work out exactly what this. To me, the big question is what's going to be happening with this head plate. I've just got some galvanized wire here that I'm using for the armature, and it's just going to be fast and sloppy. I'm going to grab some clippers in a second here, and I'll show you how to wrap up this version of an armature. And look, this is just a regular piece of plumbing pipe. And I'm just looking at something here that's going to hold the clay in place so I can push it around and get this sculpture right. Listen, I don't want to talk down to you folks. I don't know how much to explain. This is actually wet clay, which has got a little more oil mixed in than traditional wet clay, so it will last a little bit longer. And like I said, I just want to do a head, maybe a little bit of a neck here. I just want to quickly rough in the shape, just a general human face and human head. I do want to come up with some realistic proportions here, and then I'll take the top of the head down just so I don't artificially shoot too small. You know, another way of doing this would be to, we actually use them a lot here at the studio. We'll have small scale heads that are already built, like little half scale plaster busts. And those are really useful because we've already kind of taken the time to put the right proportions in, and it's just a much quicker way to start off when you're doing a scaled down thing. It's funny, after all of my talk about just using hands and getting into clay, I do want to get some tools on this thing just so I can start blocking out some shapes, and that means time for Old Pal Professional. And I know a lot of you out there are wondering, oh, he doesn't have a Rebel? When I was 6. But now, I'm an old professional, so I've got the Old Pal Professional. And what's the first tool I pull out of here? Yeah, the 29-cent Kemper plastic dog toy. And it's just part of my rich history in this box, which I hope we get a chance to delve into later. Maybe that should be a whole separate lesson. I don't know. You know, keeping in mind the whole concept thing, I do really like using clay as a concept medium much more than drawing. And probably, look, I don't really consider myself proficient in either one. I feel like, though, of the two directions, whether it's flat art or sculpture, I do feel like I can kind of struggle through and get a better handle on sculpture than I can on drawings, because I think it's probably perspective in a drawing. I kept working in mostly in profile because that's my handicap. That's where I like to work in profile. And in terms of fuller concept, and especially when we get into more detail, I'm not the guy that's going to struggle, and at this point in my life, really, I don't think pick up perspective. So I like to kind of get into clay and be able to work things out that way. And here's something else I'll tell you that is, there's plenty of times where I sort of wish, and you'll see why, I wish I had taken some formal lessons in sculpture, and I never did. Everything I did was sort of self-taught and watching. I mean, I had the benefit of being able to work with really, really terrific sculptors over the years, and to be able to watch their process and understand the process didn't mean necessarily I could duplicate it, but at least it kind of gave me a direction. And not sculpting as often as I wish I could. It's, I don't know, like I said, a little rusty, but maybe for concepts, this will be just fine. This clay is really soft. I usually work with a harder clay. It's kind of hard to get any real proper shapes out of this material. And again, I'm not looking so much at trying to duplicate these features as much as I'm just trying to get more of a generic human shape. What I'm doing when I keep sighting down the top of it is just making sure that in terms of dimensions, it's proper all the way around. It's too easy to just sculpt, especially if you're trying to duplicate something just from a photograph, and rather than from a sitting, to kind of forget that you just kind of study one viewpoint. And I've actually had this happen on likenesses that I've tried to do from photographs, where I end up getting one position that works correctly, and then if I go to a profile or a different angle, it's like the perspectives are all so wrongly rendered that it doesn't look real, except for that one tiny point of that one focal point that the photograph was taken from. It's funny, this concept approach we do almost all of our shows. I mean, most recently, we did the practical effects for the movie The Thing, the prequel to the John Carpenter movie. And we got into a lot of creature stuff on paper, but it really came to life once we got into sculptural 3D sculpture, clay sculptures. And I got to tell you, at one point we were actually in meetings across town at the production company, and we had a couple of our maquettes roughed out and looking at them there with the directors and the producers. And the great thing about this was to be able to sit there in that meeting and to be able to make changes right there on the clay sculptures. Again, going back to my earlier discussions about wanting to make sure that you go far enough that you're actually overshooting a concept to really feel like you've got it roped in. And in doing that, sitting there in that office, I didn't have sculpting tools with me. I actually just pulled out my car keys and started chopping into a model. And it was very rough. No surprise. But it was very rough, and it was very, very crude, but it got the point across, and it was a nice tool to visually immediately see in 3 dimensions. And I keep talking about 3 dimensions because that's the difference between doing a piece of artwork and having a piece here that you can actually move around in the light, and see how all those forms are starting to work. Even if we're doing just a makeup, well, actually, if we're doing a pretty extreme makeup, we'll go this route. We'll go with maquettes sculpted this way. Definitely the creature work. It's just much easier to handle a design concept in a smaller scale rather than committing to a full-scale sculpture right off the bat. If we're doing a makeup, like what did we do recently? X-Men Origins with Beast. We knew who the actor was, we had some concept stuff, and we went directly into full-scale sculptures because then it was strictly talking about facial forms, and to get into a maquette really wouldn't have served the purpose because most of the focus would have been on just getting a likeness of the actor. So we, foregoing that step in a makeup approach is usually pretty common. The only reason I'm really doing it here, to show you the technique, it's useful, but also because I still want to play around yet with the shape of the head and make sure I've got the exact look that I want. So what I'm going to do here, rather than try to sculpt the eye form in, I'm just going to drop. It's a plastic sphere. Basically it's an eye blank, meaning it just is the shape of the eye. And by dropping this in, I can build the brows around it, and I can make sure that in doing that, I don't ever lose the surface level of those eyes, so the eyes are always in the right plane compared to the rest of the face. I'm leaving the eyes as they are. I just want to build out some more of these planes before I bother roughing in the eyelids. Like I said, the top of the head's the most critical thing to get locked down. Those hanging eyelids are, to me, the next important visual statement in this character. And even though they're a lot easier to do, I just think in terms of this maquette, I do want to make sure that they're somewhat represented. When I sculpt, I like to, I actually like to build up. The process I like is more building up. It's more additive than it is subtracting. I'm just subtracting a lot because I'm making a lot of mistakes. But it's just, for me, I also like, it's rare for me to build up this quick, and I'm doing this for the lesson. I actually like building up with smaller adding smaller pieces and kind of controlling them that way. I remember seeing a sculptor once build an entire head, full-size head, out of little tiny beads about the size of these eye forms of oil clay. We were using oil clay at the time, and he would actually build most of the head that way and then slowly blend it in. And it took a lot of time, but what was really interesting was he didn't then just rake the whole surface down and make it smooth. He would just slowly kind of go in there and just keep working the surface of the clay. So in the end, even though you had a convex form, it still had, it was a great looking organic kind of flow to it. It didn't look like diseased flesh, but it looked very, very alive and very realistic and not artificially created. So I saw that and I started playing around with that technique, and that's all additive. I mean, he subtracted very little, and I really like that process a lot. And a lot of times if I have something that I'm spending the time on, I love getting into just slowly building up forms, especially when you're just laying out the general parameters of the face. I just want to rough in some lids now and start messing around with this head shape. Oh, look, here's another great tool out of the Old Pal Professional. This is a number 7 dental spatula, and this is one of the first tools when I worked for Tom Berman. He actually gave me one of these spatulas. Hard to believe that he could look into the Old Pal and think I was lacking anything, but he gave me this spatula, and it was really cool. And he described it to me, and he would tell me these great stories about. What did he say? John Chambers would say that you should be able to do an entire face sculpture, a head sculpture, using just this tool and your hands, blocking stuff out. But he was talking in terms of details and how important it was to John, and then also to Tom, in terms of artistically to work in a way in which you're planing things off. You're using the flat part of the spoon here and the pointed part of the spade at this end, and working in flat planes, and I love that tool. I always used it, and at some point, I actually lost it somehow, and because you may have noticed the Old Pal does not carry a lock, and I'll tell you why. Nobody steals from the Old Pal, and but somebody did. No, I was careless. I lost it. So I went back to Tom, and I had him do a new one for me. He inscribed. I actually had him do 2 for me. So now I can be careless and lose one and still have one for my golden years. Now here's an interesting predicament with this clay being so soft and so wet. If it was up to me, if I didn't have you guests here in my studio, I would probably just let this sit for an hour or 2 and walk away, and just let it harden up a little bit. And the reason I don't just hit it with a hairdryer is if I do that, it will dry out the outer side, and the inside is still going to be wet, and it's not going to give me the ability to do any of the finer work. Once you get to that stage, then you're kind of switching the approach, and it's no longer an additive process. Then it's definitely a removal process, because now you're just taking away forms that are too big and working them down into smaller and smaller planes and details. Here's an interesting point about the process. The process has become so, so shared, is it? Again, because we're talking about concept, I'm not trying to pass this off as good sculpture, but I am trying to pass it off as good concept, because I do believe in the concept, and I certainly know that when the time comes to sculpt this thing out, and I take the right time and under right conditions, I know I can pull it off. So having said that, I'm just going to quickly finish off this 1/2. So at least it's the same profile as the artwork, and then we can get into the whole purpose of this, which was just to play around with that head shape and see, right, how far we want to go. I'm just going to cut away some clay here. I want to open the eyes a little bit. Look at me, I'm breaking the John Chambers rule using more than just my number 7 dental spatula. Alright, so almost there. My assumption is that a lot of people that are going to be looking at this particular lesson, you're not the guys that are in the business. You know how to do concept work by then. You know how to create great looking characters, and I've seen them, and you know, great work. My understanding is that you're aspiring to do this work. This is the kind of thing that you want to do, and it's got to be the kind of thing that you just have to do, that there's nothing else that really is going to sit well with you. But to that end, what I would say is to really look at your situation and take advantage of where you are. I said earlier, I mean, and I was sincere. I do regret not having taken any classic sculpture classes or any classic, even classic drawing classes. All, you know, like I said, both of those elements are ideal for concept design work. There's plenty of really gifted artists that never had formal training, and their talent shows. I don't have that talent. I have a certain amount of talent, and it certainly could have been brought out, I think. But if you have the opportunity to do some classes, if you're in school already, take some classes. Take advantage of where you're at in your life, and fill up some of the time doing that. And certainly continue to work on your own. I almost get a few too many emails from people that say, "Oh, I love effects. I want to do effects." And okay, well, what have you done? Nothing. And these are people that are in their 20s, and they don't know exactly what it is they want to do in effects. They haven't tried anything. You jump in, you know. If I can sit here and do this sculpture in front of these cameras, you can certainly jump in, you know, in the privacy of your own garage or basement or room or whatever, and start working on sculptures. And here's the thing. Don't just, if I was going through that process right now, if this was a learning experience, I would get this to a certain point. I would probably spend another few hours on this thing, and then I would move on. Just keep generating things. I mean, you can tell when a sculpture is not working out, and maybe it's time to move on and try something in a different direction. So just keep. Yeah, just keep working on your own, and build a portfolio, collect a portfolio of drawings, sketches, and photos of sculptures that you are doing, and you'll get to a point pretty soon where you realize which ones are useful to show a level of what you can achieve, right? And which ones maybe wouldn't be quite so good. But I think the key is, if you have a love for something, then you need to do it. And it should be the kind of feeling that nothing can stop you from doing it. And I certainly think that general sculpting classes or learning yourself from books and that kind of thing is really useful. It's a really valuable raw resource, as opposed to committing, you know, a lot of money and a lot of time to a very specific aspect of the business, which makes use of different elements of the art. Okay, I think what I want to do is to just to complete this profile look. Let's I'm I'm just going to block in some hair. And I keep looking at this drawing because I'm basically looking for this point on the sculpture. That's where I'm going to start building, and then I'll take off the front of the head in whatever level, whatever degree ends up looking good. And like drawing, I like to sculpt in profile too, or silhouette. I'm looking at a profile right now, and I'm just basically laying in the mass of what I think this hair can be. And then what I'll do is I'll slowly turn it, and now I'm going to lay it in from this point of the silhouette. And then once I block in enough of like this, I can just go in and kind of fill in the voids in between. So right now this is just more about creating the right mass to help balance what's going to be gone when I start removing things from the top of the head. When I actually started working in the business, it was early 1980s. It was 1982, and back then, for the most part, everybody was all the artists were pretty much all-arounders. You know, the first show I started at, I was. Well, look, I started sweeping floors, okay, right, but I worked my way up pretty quickly, and I learned how to make molds there, so I was a mold maker. Then I showed them what I could do in terms of sculpting, and I learned to get a little better at my sculpting. So by the end of that first show, I was sculpting, I was making molds, I was running foam rubber, I was painting, I was going on the set, and I was doing makeup. And the great thing about that kind of approach was, for me, I got to learn everything. And more importantly, I got to learn how all of these things kind of interrelate. In other words, mold making is about, maintaining the value of the sculpture, right? From a technical point of view, and how does painting help to exaggerate or take the curse off of sculptural elements, and all that stuff is great. But the real shift that's what's happened in the last 10 years is that we rely a lot more on specialists. And I think that in its way is kind of fallout from the fact that there's so little time now to do projects. When we used to be able to get 5 or 6 months, sometimes more, on a project, you had that time. You could accomplish more with fewer people. So now when we get those schedules that are beat down so much smaller than that, and things have to happen so fast, now it gets to the point where I can't bring in a sculptor and give him the time to find a particular character. I've got to go with a big gun. I've got to go with a commodity who can look at the concept work and either match it exactly if we feel we've got it nailed, or do some quick exploratories to be able to make it happen quick. So I think what's lost in this specialist process is being more vested in the project. I remember being so much more excited about shows when I was doing so many aspects of it, to be able to look at sculptures and, makeups or paint jobs or something, and as opposed to being an important part. Every part's important, but as opposed to being an important part of the overall project, the overall art. And I think that's one thing we learned early, and it's certainly Stan Winston taught us that, which is it got to a point where what we're doing on a daily basis is commercial art. And I tell this to everybody that comes in here so that they understand that we understand that there's going to be times when we push them to do not the best art they can do, but the best art for the project, because commercial art is art that's done in a certain amount of time for a certain amount of money, and there's no way you can get around those restrictions that what the resources draw. So keep that in mind. I mean, you can be an amazing artist, be a hell of an artist, but a lot of times that artist that you're becoming is the person you are on the weekends and at night and in between shows, when you really have the time and the freedom to focus on exactly what it is you're trying to put out there. I feel like just in general, I feel like this is blocked in enough. Again, if I just look past all the inaccuracies of this process, the thing where it still holds true is that it gives me a good read on proportion. So now what I want to do is start playing around with where we're really going to go with this head. And I suddenly now have a feeling that I'm going to get into an armature that I wasn't kind of thinking ahead about. I'm sure I will, but we'll figure something out. I think what would be really interesting on this character is probably what would be the next step, which would be doing a full-scale sculpture, because a full-scale sculpture on the person that's going to wear the makeup, because that's really going to tell us what the proper proportions are. And I think I'm going to add a little more clay back here and sheet this up, because I want that raked angle. It drops down from the back to the front. See that? A little bit of armature sticking up there. I can do one of two things. I can fix it or I can ignore it. And at this stage, I'm choosing to ignore it, but maybe I'll take a little smack at it and see. So here's a little piece of my armature showing, and don't ever become a complete slave to your armature. Don't ever become a complete slave to your work. Always change it. Just if you can do it once, you can do it better the second time. The nice thing about armatures like this is you can just knock them down out of the way. When I was working for Tom Berman, his father was a tremendous sculptor, and not just doing the studio work on movies. Back in the 30s and 40s, he was the guy that sculpted the cane head, the Wolfman cane head, right? And did other very cool things all throughout his career. But Tom also showed me pictures of fine art installations that his father had worked on, full bronzes. And the process of, he showed me, I'm pretty sure he showed me the actual armatures, pictures of the armatures, and they were all built out of, obviously a larger scale than this wire. They were built out of steel rod, but they were so intricately woven as to produce enough strength that it could hold, tons of clay and then a mold on top of that. But if something was sticking out, like I had just there on the head, he said you could just go in and tap it with a hammer and just bend little pieces in, and it just sounded to me like such a cool process. And in a way, that's what this is, in a much smaller scale, being able to do that. So, okay, the big difference again that I'm seeing right here is just in experimenting, because I wasn't sure about this, but I took off this front bump, and as I look at it here, the problem with that is now I don't get so much the feeling that material has been removed as that it's actually become kind of like a pinhead. So that's entirely the wrong way to go, and I just want to believe that going back this way and adding some of that material back up here in the front is going to be stronger for the character. And here's something else that's interesting when you're doing maquettes, especially when you've got something small like this. Makes it easy is to keep changing the angle. I love sculpting when I'm standing up, because when I'm not trying to stay in the right position for the cameras, obviously, but I like moving around. I like walking away from it, different angles, but also make sure you're looking at it from the top and from the bottom as well, not just in terms of matching the symmetry, but just looking at the overall impact, the overall proportions, because, I mean, don't forget, that's the whole reason we're going to this step and getting off of drawings, is so you can see it all the way around in 3 dimensions. If I was doing this right now on a full-scale head, it's going to take a lot more time. It's going to be a little harder to make quick changes and, you know, to practically look at different things. And even though I keep saying it's not about detail, I'm not detailing hair right now. I just want to get some different lines, because there's something to the flow of lines that is important to the whole character. That's why I think people really vastly underestimate the value of hair and wigs and hair pieces on characters like this, because there's a way that they can be used to really enhance the character, and there's ways they can be used to just complete a character, and I'm always much more for using something that's going to help enhance the character. That's why I feel like the hair has to be designed as carefully as the makeup is. So you can see I'm playing around too with the idea. I've gone with a little bit more of an inset here than I may have up here. Once I got into clay and started looking at it in 3 dimensions, it just felt a little more interesting that way than to just have it blend from top all the way to bottom. And then when I come in here and drop this big surgical scar, that's going to also help further define the shapes in the head. I also think this is interesting too, in that I haven't tried to really smooth out this head. You can still see there's a lot of little shapes that are kind of like a separate little rise and fall to these planes. So it's not like just about 2 half domes that are sitting side by side. There's some organic movement to them underneath. So I'm also trying to keep in mind that we're going to have this big open suture here, and I'm going to go deep to make a really dark shadowed line just to make sure that's the look I want. And what I can see right now in doing that is that I want to make sure that at some point the hair is long enough to cross over that line, just so it doesn't become so obvious that it's just laying out there to grab attention, right? I'm going to just quickly, I just want to hit this overall with a rake, which is a sculpting tool here that's made by taking a jeweler's saw, and you can heat it up over a candle and bend it, and then I just insert the ends into this brass tube to make this basically serrated carving edge. And depending on how hard or how deep you push into this, you can use this to really nicely start to not plane things off like in a flat way, but to certainly to go through and start cleaning up all of the different planes, not just a flat or a curve, but even all the tiny little shapes that I want to preserve. And the fact that it leaves this little serrated surface is really great for evaluating forms, because these little tiny lines help to catch the light and really help to define the surfaces. And I think that if this wasn't so much about the steps of showing you the yet another tool of technique of design, I mean, for me, I feel like I'm ready to move on to the next step, which sort of is the blurred area between design or execution, which would be now to do this at full scale. And I think in a really practical application, one of 2 things would be happening to create a next step. That would be that there's actually a job, an assignment for this character, or that we want to take the concept all the way to completion as a tool to sell interest in the character, even though nobody's been cast. So if this was a production that was going on into shooting, while all of this concept work is going on, we would probably be taking life casts of the actor and creating all kinds of positives. And I would probably go right from this step into grabbing a copy of the actor's full head not just his face, but I do his full head, and I would start sculpting with as little clay as I can use to get the character across, so I'm not building up big thick pieces on the actor's head, but I would start working full scale. Now if it's not going to be an assignment, and if I don't really have an actor chosen, then I would choose to just do a full-size sculpture that takes this all the way to complete detail, all in the correct size, all in the correct proportions, even as far as getting into finished detail like poor texture and tiny wrinkles. And I would probably duplicate it, finish it off as a silicone bust, so it has a real natural translucent quality, and I'd have hand-punched hair, and I put in glass eyes, and I would do all of that in an effort to take it to studios, take it to producers who have a project like this in the works, and use this as an example to show them what the final character would look like when the makeup is already applied to the actor and the digital effect of dropping the head was already in place, and basically gives them something on the desk in front of them to really look at and consider. I don't know if you're able to see it. I don't know if the light's quite right to see the final texturing again, which is done just in an effort to draw all of these shapes together and give the light a continuous path across the big planes. It's funny, even at this scale, to me the brow without eyebrows on it feels a little bit too over the top. And if I could just block some clay in here just to take up that form. So I do want to at least block this shape in. And just aside from final work on some of these forms and getting the proportions a little more exact, this is it. This is the tool. This is where this step of the technique serves its purpose, and it would be time to stop and move on. So that's my lesson on character design techniques. I hope you've learned a lot. We started simple with character design sketches, moved to more refined sketches with refined drawings, and then into Photoshop design where we took actual elements of photographic faces and combined them into this concept. Finishing with a three-dimensional maquette in clay so we could see what the design looked like in 3 dimensions. Otherwise, it's just a character that exists in your head and has no way to be able to be presented to potential producers and directors. So, for the Stan Winston School of Character Arts, I'm Tom Woodruff Jr., and thanks for watching.